Welcome to Soul Elevation, guiding your ascension to new heights. I'm your host, Kara Goodwin, and this is such a beautiful and profound episode with Kristina Amelong. Kristina is the author of an excellent memoir called What My Brother Knew. Let me show you here. I've got it here. Look at this beautiful book. There is so much in this book, from how her brother psychically predicted the exact cause of his own death, to Kristina's journey of processing her grief and the trauma from not being able to do that, to the beautiful ways we can help someone transition into their deaths, and the cultural stigma we have around death and dying. We also talk about colonics and enemas and how they've helped her to overcome massive health issues, which I also found fascinating. Kristina Amelong lives on the east side of Madison, Wisconsin, just a few miles from where she grew up. From a working class childhood filled with abuse, addiction, and loss, she's overcome addiction and chronic illness, raised 4 children, and founded a successful holistic health business, Optimal Health Network. She's developed natural protocols which have helped thousands heal from a wide range of digestive and other chronic issues. And she's the author of What My Brother Knew, an emotional, eye-opening memoir about her journey from loss and abuse to healing and spiritual awakening. Her first book was 10 Days to Optimal Health, a guide to nutritional therapy and colon cleansing. So we'll get into this amazing episode in just a moment, but first I'm so excited to share about my book, Your Authentic Awakening, a guide to everyday spiritual living. This book is designed to help you reach new heights of spiritual awakening. It's full of spiritual guidance, practical tools, and captivating personal stories, all working together to expand your consciousness and open your heart. Find out more information on karagoodwin.com, including how to get your own signed copy. And now, enjoy this episode. Well, welcome, Kristina. I'm so excited to have you here today. Thanks for coming on.
You're so welcome, and such an honor to be here with Kara and your audience. Thank you.
Well, you have this amazing memoir that's coming in May, What My Brother Knew. So let's start by telling us about your brother, Jay.
So my brother, Jay, he, a very unusual human. And yet such a normal kid. He was very popular. He was very sports oriented. He was also into a lot of, we were kind of wild, running around our neighborhood. We had a lot of nature around. And so we were just, living a great outdoor life. And so he was always getting hurt. But he started when he was 12 years old. He started telling myself, my mother, his friends, and at least one of his cousins that he would die young, that it was fine. There was nothing we could do about it, that he wasn't upset about it, but it was going to happen, that it had something to do with a green car, that he'd be up above his body watching the paramedics try to bring him back to life, but they wouldn't be able to. And that he wanted to be buried at Neptune Cemetery in Ithaca, Wisconsin, and that he wanted the song Stairway to Heaven played at his funeral. And for a year and a half before his accident, he was telling details of this story, just spontaneously. And May 27, 1981, he was hit by a car, a green car, on his bicycle, and dragged for quite a bit of time, and under the car, died 2.5 hours later. And even now, when I tell the story, like the tears arise in my body. It's quite something. It was very painful and tragic and horrible, and yet he walked to it with complete openness. To this day, it's a very strange thing.
It is. It's such a captivating story that he knew such detail, and your memoir is fantastic. I highly recommend, if you're listening to this, go and get this book. It's whether you're interested in that, the fact that he understood that he was going to die, the level of detail that he knew, which is intriguing in and of itself, because that points to there being much more going on than just beyond, or much more going on beyond our physical materialistic understanding of life, that there is this consciousness that exists beyond time and space that he was tapping into. But there's so much with this book. There are so many layers with it, because your journey with dealing with with his death, dealing with the fact that he knew that it was happening and you guys didn't really know what to do with that level of information. What do you do with that? Do you bubble wrap him and not let him leave his room so that doesn't happen? Because he was so beloved, not only in your home, but, in the community. And then you, just by virtue of your upbringing and kind of the times that we're in, the society that we live in, you weren't able to really process that grief. You were never really able to express it. You didn't know what to do with it. And it was such a taboo thing. And so then how that impacted, because you're looking for some sort of outlet for these really heavy, strong emotions and trying to process and integrate what happened. And there's no help with that. And the way that it affected all the people who, all the tangential people who touched Jay. And then dealing with death, as you move through life, as you kind of go through your spiritual journey, and you are able to kind of understand things, and you do get tools. And so let's dive a little bit into how his accident and his death informed your spiritual journey. Like, what comes up for you when you think of your own evolution as understanding kind of why we're here and what's going on through the lens of dealing with Jay's death?
Beautiful. Thank you. Well, yeah, just to reiterate, it's still traumatizing because my brother's body was stretched, ripped apart. His head was exploded. It was terrible. And so it's very traumatizing. And then on top of that, right, there was no discussing it. There was no exploring it. There was no awe and wonder about what exactly is the world, such that a person could know that they were going to die very violently, and then be okay with that process would happen. And so for the longest time, even decades, I, first of all, didn't talk about it. Just was using drugs and alcohol to cope. And then once I got into the 12-step program, even then, and part of why in the book there's those many layers, where I had to look at what happened in my young life, because all the pain was kind of condensed into one thing. So I had to kind of parse out, okay, I'd had this difficult childhood, and then, okay, now I can get to, oh, my brother, what happened with my brother? And then I could start talking about it. And as I'm telling that story, instead of being told to not talk about it, people were like, wow, you should write a book about that. Wow, that's an incredible story. And also it just turned on and who knows, I've always been very close to the natural world, nature, being by myself, running around in the marsh and all of these things. So I've always had that. But this thing about what is the deepest nature of reality, I feel like because I've had to, because I feel like I'm a torchbearer to this story, because there's no story like this story, right? And he wanting us to know, that's such a big thing. And I feel like even now that I've written the book and it's out there in the world, these conversations, why did my brother so much want us all to know, right? And so he really wanted us to know. And but for instance, as one would read in the book, my mother never wanted to talk about it, never did talk about it. And so including her last words to me were, stop talking about dying. That's your thing.
Yeah.
She's one day from her death. And so basically, as I went along, then I kept having deep synchronicities, like on his birthday, on his death day. Um, all these things would happen that would just be so profoundly like um, his experience with something that I would hear or somebody I would meet or some information that would come to me at a particular moment, some experience. And so I kept turning to the inquiry basically of how could this be? What happened? And I want to talk about it. I want to explore it. And thus, have had this beautiful opportunity of turning grief into awe and wonder, and respecting the profound depths of pain and rage and confusion and fear that have lived in my body and come through my body. And then also really using all of that to ever further heal my own soul and being, and to come to understand the continuity of consciousness, that we don't live in a materialistic world, that precognition is a thing that a lot of people experience, that we shouldn't ignore a lot of these signs and synchronicities that come to our lives that seem unusual, and also a lot like this whole concept that I talk about in the book, like aloneness as a monastery, instead of feeling like, which I used to have in my head all the time, nobody likes me, everyone hates me, but that doesn't exist in me anymore. But my aloneness is still something that is in my life. So that I've said a lot there. And so maybe you can help parse out what you want to go deeper into or not.
Well, and there's a lot there. There's a lot in your journey. One of the things that I loved so much was you had all those years of hiding what was going on inside, or not being, like we talked about, you weren't allowed to talk about it. You didn't have any outlet for those feelings. I think it was when you lived in London, then you came across a certain modality where people just were holding space for whatever came through. And that was a new experience for you, of being able to express the tears. And they were like, yes, do it, do more. Like, yeah, just hold it. And you're so embarrassed and you're feeling ashamed. And it's like, I'm so sorry that and it's so clear, like, how cathartic that was, to just have people not trying to make it better, but just letting you, like, be like water, like, just let it flow through you so that it could, this frozen energy that was within you, this frozen trauma, could thaw and be expressed. Can you share? I don't even remember what that modality was called, and then you became a facilitator in that too. But I love that.
Right. That's beautiful. I love that metaphor about becoming like water. Right. It's like, in what I was just saying about how the energy was stuck in me and it was turned against me. And like, there's something wrong with me, and self-hatred and all of that. But once I was able to discover reevaluation co-counseling, um, I was given the blessing of finding a lot of people in community who I could set up a half an hour each with, an hour each. I mean, I've done hundreds of hours of this, where you just set a timer, you take turns, and you just fully put your attention on the person, and you fully are encouraged, allowed, to beat pillows, scream at the top of your lungs, just sob and sob and sob, and to not feel like you have to stop after a minute or 30 seconds or you're too much. To really be able to process out these energies, and just completely invaluable to be able to have those gifts of peer counseling, basically.
Mm, it is such a gift. And it's so critical that we do feel our feelings, but so often, especially when it comes to death, people just don't know what to say or what to do or how to act, whether you're on either side of it. And this was another profound thing with your book and your experience, was when your mom, you did allude to this, but when your mom was going through her dying process at the end of her life, and how you were able, there was so much healing it felt that came through for your relationship with her, and also just for you to be able to have a different experience around death. I know several people right now who either their parents are going through a dying process, a transition, or it's right there on the horizon, or they have just gone through it. And it's hard. I think a lot of people get stuck with, we don't want to feel like we're rubbing salt in the wound. Like if somebody is dying, it's maybe we feel it's more polite to pretend that that's not happening so that they don't have to face it. Tell me your thoughts and your experience on that perspective.
Even now, I feel it like human beings have an interior, and that interior is really probably the most important part of who we are, is all that is going on our inside. And so often we just learn to shut down and get smaller and smaller on our interior. But what I found from facing death is that, especially around death, there's like a potency, there's a beauty, a truth, a goodness. There's so much love. And even though right up to the moment of my mom's death, her and I hadn't healed, but because I had come to see death as something that was such a beautiful part of living, right, I was able to help her, A and B with her, and really prioritize her, even though I didn't know how long it would take. It was taking a lot of my time. I was with her every day for 6 months before she passed. She wasn't all that nice to me a lot of the time, but it didn't matter because I can feel this eternal journey that I'm having with my mother. And so I could let go of the narratives that were hanging around in this lifetime, and I could just be in the total devotion to this human being that brought me into the world, right? And that I was helping ushering into the next world. And so in the context of doing that, because I could see that she was dying, she had COPD, so she was basically drowning in her own lungs. She was having less and less capacity to breathe, and now she had been put on morphine. So I started inviting her sisters over and some of her friends for a meal, for Euchre, these kinds of things. Euchre, her favorite game, which comes through in the memoir a lot. But this particular moment that you're talking about that's in the memoir, I had to leave and come home and walk my dogs. And when I take a shower, and when I had come back, she was being lifted up by her hospice nurses, and she was barely conscious. And when she saw me, she kind of perks up. And the day before, her sisters had come, and I talked to them. I don't think it's going to be that much longer. And maybe my mother had overheard this or whatever. And she perked up and she looks me right in the eyes and she said, "Stop telling people I'm dying. That's your thing." Those were her very last words to me. And so this thing about death and, the importance of death and facing death and holding death. So as someone who's been on both sides of these processes and not talking about it and talking about it, I do have to say that, like, embracing it, talking about it, facing the pain, sobbing for however many hours it takes, raging, all of that, like, there's so much beauty and so much aliveness and so many gifts that come from being able to do that work and being able to be present with the dying process, with that we're going to die, right?
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I did notice that Euchre was an ongoing theme, and which is funny because I live in Indiana, and I thought that was an Indiana thing.
That is a Wisconsin thing, Kara.
I beg to differ. Well, we may be two of the only people who know what euchre is. I don't think it's gotten a lot of traction outside of the Midwest, but it's so much fun. I love
I
it.
teach everyone that I know how to play euchre, so I've spread it throughout the whole world a bit. Maybe, the book will make euchre the big thing in the future.
Yes, it's so fun.
A great game, yes.
It is, yes. Now, there's another theme that I noticed, and I may edit this out depending on if this goes anywhere, but there were several times where I noticed that as you're back in a memory, you talk about like maybe you're making dinner and then you swat a fly on your neck, and then you're sitting in somebody's truck and you swat a fly on your leg. And I noticed that pattern, but I think I noticed it too late to be like, is this a metaphor for something? Is that is there more to it, or was that just to kind of add some color?
Well, I'm curious, do you have a sense of what the metaphor would be if you were to perceive it as a metaphor?
Well, I'm trying to think, because I think this is why I'm like, by the time I caught on to it, I couldn't remember the other context, but I feel like there was one time when you were just in the kitchen as a child cooking and Jay was still alive, because I was thinking if it was around death, if it's this like gnat that we, want to swat away, or, it's a nuisance. But I don't know.
Well, I think this is beautiful that you're bringing this up. Like, and I haven't thought about this in a lot of detail, but I think you're right. A and B. I wrote this book out of a contemplative writing process, and for me, the natural world is just so woven into my existence. Being a farm girl, living in Wisconsin, getting out all the time in the woods and walking my dogs, and so there's that level of it that part of the world is very much just woven within. And then I think it also, because there's a scene with the spider, if you remember that.
I don't remember the spider.
Well, it's the daddy long legs, which is actually not a spider.
That's right. Yes. And you say that. Yeah.
I have to say that because my editors made me say that. So I think, yes, it's the quality of the ever present and the way we're always pushing that away, but that ever present is such a core force in our lives. And then also one of the things that I'm talking about and want to also bring to the global conversation is that we are facing all these existential risks and all these meta crises and the extinction of a lot of species, and the way that people, like, how do we look at the future such that we're facing it directly and we're not catastrophizing the future and we're not losing hope over the future. We're creating a positive memory of our future, but we're looking towards our future. Jay looked at his future with a completely open heart, and his was a path of death. And my goal is to help usher humanity through these meta crises to a much more beautiful future than we currently seem to be facing with all the various crises that we're facing. And so part of it is bringing in just the reality of this bigger world that we're living in and our intimate relationship with it. So I really appreciate that question. And also, when I reread the book like a month ago to get ready for these interviews, I was kind of in awe of the way that the insects are woven through there so like evenly. And like, I didn't plan that. So there is a magic that the book itself is manifesting that inspires even me. So
I love that. Yeah. I mean, and as a child of I grew up in the 80s, born in the 70s. It also just harkened back to, when we had windows open and the air conditioning wasn't so prevalent, things weren't as comfortable. You would have flies around more often, I feel, than exists now. Like everything is just a little more like insulated. So it kind of like harkened me back to, nostalgia with that as well. So there was that element and layer too. But yeah, I love it. There was just so much, so many layers, and I love that that was kind of just magic for you because, like you say, it was sprinkled out so like it felt precise, and that's why I was saying like it was like a pattern that showed up. But I love that it was just an organic thing that kind of happened.
Well, so I am a contemplative writer. I really struggle to create a whole and to hold that and make it happen. So I ended up working with a team of people to manifest the book. And so there is a certain quality of magic in working with the way I worked with one of my daughters because she helped with pulling the book together and then multiple editors. So I feel like we're highlighting also that that the symphony of humans, but also the symphony of the spirits, the insects, the natural world, they all have, because I don't think any of us like did that well woven quality. It really just came through.
Happened.
So
That's magical. And that gives me chills too.
well,
Oh,
so
wow.
neat, right? Because so many of us have these spiritual experiences that are quite profound, but they are often witnessed. And so to come onto your podcast, Soul Elevation, and to feel into that space and to speak about it a bit more and to say, yeah, there's magic going on right here,
Yeah.
right now. And that's something that's accessible to all human beings. And especially the more we self-examine ourselves and also the deeper mysteries of the cosmos.
That's beautiful. And I have a book coming out next month too, and I
Late.
thank you. And the way that you describe that, it just also mirrors my experience with my book because I worked with a couple of editors and there were things in there that got kind of matured from how I had put them. And then going back and rereading it, or I like recorded the audio book recently. And so I was rereading it as I was reading it out loud. And there were things in there that just, I was like, oh my God, I didn't even mean to do that. But there were, for example, 3 subsections in a row.
Mhm.
And I remember like creating the titles for them. And it just so happens that they're 380 songs. And I did not mean to do that. Like I remember being like, okay, what's a good thing? And oh, so emotional. Oh, I loved that Whitney Houston song. And so I didn't realize that they were, and I realized when I was doing it, oh, this is a song. And that's what I liked about it. That's why I chose it. But I didn't realize they were one after another. All 3 were under one category, like one section.
Yeah. Mhm.
And I was like, oh my gosh, looking back, that looks so deliberate.
Mhm.
And I'm like, that was completely an accident. I didn't realize they were on top of each other like that. So just things like that where it's like, wow, what's going on? Which also makes me think of your business because you have the Optimal Health Network, which I want to give you a chance to talk about because I'm fascinated by the work you're doing with Optimal Health Network. But before we get into what that is, the whole way that came about, and Jay in spirit form, his involvement in talking about synchronicities and the profound messages that he's given you throughout your life. Would you care to share about that?
Sure, I would love to. And just one more note about words, since we're on words. I've heard many an artists like Elizabeth Gilbert, etc., talk about the way that the ideas come down. And so just a shout out to the possibility of ideas directly working through us, with us. So that's
Yes.
beautiful. So yeah, um, since Jay died, anything that happens that is around his birthday, around his death date, or has a similar quality to his direct experiences, um, I instantly do those things. I never question them. And so regarding my business, well, first of all, I got chronically ill. So I started doing all that emotional work. I got into the 12-step program, and this was like my mid 20s and then to late 20s. And then when I went into my 30s, then I started being chronically ill where I just had terrible pain, gut pain. So I had celiac disease, multiple chemical sensitivities, all of that. And so in the process of learning how to get well, first of all, I tried to go to the regular doctor and they wanted to cut out my colon, which luckily I didn't do that, and things like that. And then a friend told me about colon hydrotherapy, and Donna Gates, the body ecology diet. So I started doing that, and that none of that was related to Jay that I was aware of. Once I started doing colonics, at the time I had owned, because I'd worked at McDonald's for 6 years, and then I bought a food cart in Madison, Wisconsin. We have all these food carts that bend on the library mall on the University of Wisconsin Madison campus and the farmers markets. And so I was running this restaurant, a falafel restaurant, for another 6 years. And I was I was sick. I was in pain all the time. And so, from getting colonics, I thought I'm going to open up a colon therapy store. And it was a little bit of a wrestle with my life partner at that time, because he was like, huh, what's that? And who's going to come to that? And how are you going to make money doing that? But I did it anyways. And very quickly, I had a great clientele, and that was successful. And one of the things that happened is that a gentleman who lived in Chicago, so that's like a 2.5 hour drive, he found me on the internet or somehow, and he came to see me for colonics. And as he's on my colon hydrotherapy table, he starts telling me how he came to need colonics. So his story is that, and he was called J.P. Bauman. And his story is that he was hit by a car while riding his bicycle. And when he came out of his coma, his colon didn't work. He couldn't have a poop. And so he was told to use laxatives or whatever, but he ended up on using enemas. And he liked to go get colonics on occasion. And so he came to me and he told me, he said, you should open up an enema store on the internet. And this is like 1998. And so the internet is just getting going. It's not very popular. Open up. And plus enemas were like the evil twin. I'd been taught that you do not do enemas. They don't help people. You just do colonics. And so I had to overcome that. But because he had the same accident, and also the crazy thing is that his name is the same. JP stood for Philip. And also a month prior to that, I had worked with the woman on my table, on my colon hydrotherapy table, whose initials were also the same, but her name was Janet. I can't remember her middle name. Maybe her middle name wasn't the same, but she had the identical birthday of Jay. And so September 3rd, 1967. And she was a webmaster. And so I immediately, when JP said, you should open up an enema store, I immediately called her up, like while he's on the table. I said, Janet, do you want, because I think we had become instant friends because, she had the same birthday as my brother. And I called her up and I said, hey, you want to open up an enema store? And she said, yes. And then right away she went on GoDaddy and she bought the URL, enemabag.com. And from that moment, the three of us worked together to open up my internet site. And now it's called Optimal Health Network. I also have Enema Bag still, but optimalhealthnetwork.com is where we do most of the work. And yes, I have this beautiful opportunity because of that to work with people all over the world on all sorts of issues around their health, from irritable bowel, cancer, fibromyalgia, just detoxing. We do a lot of hair tissue mineral analysis, and I do services here. I do massage, I do prostate massage. And so I have a very intimate world of work where I'm helping people heal. And in part, it was because of my own tragedy of getting chronically ill, and also very much came to fruition because I listened to these synchronicities that are around Jay's experience.
Wow. And how did your health improve?
So my health is great now. I mean, I'm always living therapeutically. Like I just had PRP therapy, as I had said.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, I no longer have multiple chemical sensitivities, and I largely feel great.
That's amazing. The hair tissue analysis, that helps you understand if you're deficient in minerals. Is that right?
Well, you take your hair and they send it to a lab and they measure your minerals, both your healthy minerals, calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium, etc. And it also measures lead, mercury, aluminum. And so we take the healthy minerals and we find out if they're low. So if we need to supplement those, but also we put ratios together. So for instance, when you put the calcium to magnesium together, you find out if you're overeating carbohydrates, the calcium to phosphorus together, if you need more protein. When you put the, is it the calcium to potassium? I don't remember all the details, but one of them ratio wise is the thyroid ratio. Two of them are about adrenal health and how well you're handling stress. The zinc to copper ratio is all about your hormone. And so it's a great tool and super affordable. And it comes with 15 minutes of time with me to help analyze it and give a full protocol. And I work with 100 people every month around this stuff and give them protocols and help people have better lives.
Wow. What if you color your hair? Can you still do it?
Yeah, you just need to let it grow out a little bit so that because you're taking the roots because you want the growth that's closest to your scalp anyways, because that's giving us the information about now versus, if you take it from here, that's what was going on however many years ago. So you do have to let it grow out a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, and even if it's partly colored, like half colored, it's still useful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's super great.
Yeah, I think I might need to look into that.
Oh, I'd love to work with you.
Awesome. Good. Well, this has just been amazing. I do want to show your book because it's also such a great cover. But I want to emphasize again to everybody listening what my brother knew. It's such a great book. It's so vulnerable as well. Something just fell out of it. It's so vulnerable. It's so honest. And I think that also helps people because we can be so hard on ourselves thinking, we're not grieving right, or, we've had these traumas and it makes us less than, or whatever it is that we tell ourselves. So when we come across such a raw story that's told with such honesty and such an open heart, it really helps for us to meet ourselves, warts and all.
That's beautiful. I'm so honored to be participating in that. And also to highlight this whole thing about the intersection between trauma and spirituality. That is a reality, I think, of the human being in our growth process, that these areas where we have the most suffering and the most pain are rich with the most possibility for growing. And so to not be afraid of the depths of our darkness and to really enter that with the right support, ideally, and to find our way through. And there's no one right way to do grieving. Everyone has their own very personal way. And that is the right way for that person.
Right. Yes. So beautiful. So, Kristina, please tell everybody how they can find your book and how they can connect with you.
So my book is available at all the major booksellers. It comes out on May 27th, or 2000, whatever this year is, 2025. And
that's Jay's death day, right?
Yeah, and I didn't even pick that. The publisher picked.
You're kidding.
Yeah, and I didn't even I had to, because in this copy, there's some errors, the advanced reader copy, and I didn't have the date right. And they picked, even though the date wasn't right, they picked it. So that's fascinating, right?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's his death anniversary, the day the book comes out. And I hear that from another writer. I don't know, do you know this? The best day to buy the book is the day it comes out. That really helps it zoom up in the Amazon algorithm. So but also the two websites are KristinaAmelong.com and also OptimalHealthNetwork.com.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I've really loved talking to you. And
I'm sad we're not ending already, are we?
We are. Maybe we'll have to do another one.
Always be open to that. I'm having such a wonderful time.
Oh, likewise. Thank you so much for coming on.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Soul Elevation. Please take a moment to think about someone in your life who might be uplifted or have their curiosity sparked by this content, and send it on to them. Let's keep sharing high-frequency, empowering content to reinforce the highest potential for humanity. I also invite you to subscribe to this content. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you for the next episode of Soul Elevation.